If you were ever wondering how actually a pilot works with a large corporation such as MediaMarktSaturn and a startup, and you're curious to know more about it, then we now have the great opportunity to welcome Dr. Christopher Bayer, who is the Senior Manager of Innovation Projects and Culture at MediaMarktSaturn, and Franciscos, who is the CEO and co-founder of 7lytics. They're going to talk about their project together that they've done over the last couple of months. And I would actually love to have Franciscos to kick it off and tell a little bit more about your solution and your pilot you did together with MediaMarktSaturn. Franciscos, the stage is yours.
Good. So thank you everyone for the patience and welcome. I'm Franciscos from 7lytics. We are a startup from Linz in Austria. We founded in the year 2016. We are around 20 data scientists, so people with a quantitative background, but also practical experience in retail. And our customers are large corporations. Two of them are so happy with us that they invested 1 million euros in our company, namely Raiffeisen Landesbank Upper Austria and Mediaprint, who are the biggest bank and media company in Austria, respectively. And we have other customers like Deutsche Bahn, in the past Audi, Henkel, Salamander, and so on. So what do? We look at the most important use cases in retail, most important in the sense that it brings the most benefit if done properly for the retailer, like for example, demand forecasting, which is important to have no out of stock, to have an optimal supply chain, new product sales prediction for an optimal purchase and return on investment, and next best offer and customer journey analytics to engage your customers. And together with MediaMarktSaturn, we did a very nice and straightforward pilot project, which was about optimizing the performance of the German MediaMarkt Club newsletter. You can see here on the screen, this is an example of it. So each member of each loyalty customer gets once per month this newsletter, and he or she gets offered 4 products. And our task was to, for a group of the customers, make personalized recommendations with artificial intelligence and compare the performance to that of the MediaMarktSaturn algorithm. And how did we do it? Well, we received a lot of data from MediaMarktSaturn, sales data, customer demographics, anonymous, of course. I would like to emphasize that no personal data is required in our product. Product information and historical newsletter data. And what we did then was to use modern artificial intelligence methods, in particular deep neural networks. And these deep neural networks are able to learn a representation of the customer product interaction. And also what we did is that because the timing of the offer is important and not each product is available or is a good idea to offer it at each time, we learned to rank the products differently over time. So what was the output in 2 runs? We offered for more than 1 million customers of the club the list of 4 product recommendations, and then together we evaluated if the customers purchased these products in the stores 7 days after each newsletter. And the results were quite interesting. We did 2 runs. In the first run, at the end of 2019, we defined the KPI as a conversion rate. So we looked at our conversion rate, MediaMarktSaturn looked at their conversion rate, and we had a huge uplift at the product level, more than 500%. For our recommendations at the product group level. So if you, for example, recommended television, a specific one, we counted at the product level, but we also looked if people bought other televisions. Here we had 6.5% uplift. But to be fair, MediaMarktSaturn had a higher total basket value. And what did we learn from the first round was that our deep learning model learned to really optimize the conversion rate, so the task that it was set to do. But it did it in the sense that it offered far less products than MediaMarktSaturn. So we offered 300 products and they offered 8,000. So we went for optimizing the metric. MMS were at the long tail on the diversification. So we agreed to do a second run and measure another KPI, the ratio of conversion rate to holdout. So we looked at how products which we recommended were bought and in comparison to a group which did not receive any recommendation. And here the results were that we had a 53% uplift versus a 25% uplift for MediaMarktSaturn, which is double as much, which was also very fine. And the learning was, of course, that you need to be really careful and think about what do you want to optimize. And of course, look at what is the business value of each of the metrics that you do. Yeah, and to sum it up, we were able to show that a neural network approach that we use is very flexible in learning different targets and different KPIs for the task. The most important thing for a successful pilot is that you have a good cooperation and that you clearly define the setup and what you want to do. And please let me finish by saying a big thanks both to Retail Tech Hub for connecting us with MediaMarktSaturn and everything else they have done for us in this batch, and specifically to Christopher and also Frank Roll and Christian Achammer from MediaMarktSaturn customer analytics team, which were really open and supportive, and we had a very good cooperation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Franciscos. We have already some questions, but we will have some time later on to go into details about that. So now I would actually like to hand over to Christopher from MediaMarktSaturn to share more about the pilot from the corporate perspective and give us an insight onto what it takes to run a successful pilot. Christopher, the stage is yours. Thank you for attending.
Perfect. Thanks, Johannes. So I hope you can hear me. See me?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so thanks, Francisco, for that great pitch. So basically, how did it all start with Sevenlytics? So we met last year in July within one of the Retail Tech Hub selection days we're having. The task of that selection day is, and I think that's very crucial for the success, to on the one hand side meet in very, very short slots startups who are then well prepared and within 20 minutes pitch their solution to us. On the other hand side, from the corporate side, it's very essential that we have the right business unit with us during that selection day. So that were the guys from the customer analytics team. And basically, the target of those 20-minute pitches is to decide, is it a hot topic which we would like to dig deeper into, or is it something which is not that appealing at first sight to us? And so obviously, Francisco did a very good job. So it was very interesting to us. So that is why the next step for us is to figure out what could be possible pilot use cases. So this did happen in August. Then we had a setup meeting to define KPIs. So how are we going to measure the success of the pilots? And that took care in September, as I said. And so that's as well, I would say, a crucial second factor to really create very transparent expectations. So what are the KPIs we are going to have a look at and which we are using to judge the pilot? And then everything was set up in terms of legal, having a pilot legal basis, and sharing that data. And then the pilot already started in November. And as Francisco said, so we took 2 rounds and finished then the pilot by the end of January. And what is very important to us is that we have then a review of the whole pilot. And as an innovation department within MediaMarktSaturn, we share outcome and results out of the pilot in order to distribute that knowledge, because of what's the reason why we're piloting. I think it is a quick learning curve for the corporate on the one hand side, but for the startup on the other hand side. So it's a win-win situation. This is how we see pilots. We always want to test things and use it in practice to learn what comes along with it. What do we have to think about? Instead of endlessly leading discussions, could this be something for us or not? And particularly interesting for me within the pilot was what Francisco's already mentioned. So after we did a first run, so the target was to optimize conversion rate. Basically, we then had a very, very for us surprising result that we saw that the MediaMarktSaturn system used a lot of more products within the newsletter, and the Analytics system a lot less. But basically, due to the setting of the target, so the AI simply did what it was targeted for, and that's a huge learning. So if you work with AI systems, so it's very essential to know what you're optimizing for, and so the key and the success of a pilot for us is to learn, to find out, is this something very, very relevant to MediaMarktSaturn, and to have that joint learning curve. So I would consider this as the key of a pilot. And from my perspective, this worked very well out with Analytics. Yeah.
All right. Thank you both for your deep insights into your collaboration. We are very excited that you shared some of your knowledge, both from the startup perspective, but also from the corporate perspective. As I said, we will have some more time probably for a thorough Q&A in the networking session later on, but audience has come up with some questions. What they want to know is, what is your key takeaway? It's probably for you, Christopher. What is a key takeaway from piloting with startups that you can share with other retailers and corporates at this moment?
The key takeaway is that you are very, very quickly in setting something up. So if we talk about, we first met in August, and so the pilot itself started in November. So it's simply a matter of speed, and startups are very flexible, and I would say as well very, very open-minded, really customer focused, and kind of diving very deep into the pilot. So it's speed, and I would call it smartness. That's the main factors for me, quickly learning something together, and that's the main driver of our work with startups to find out if innovative, promising ideas are really something to us.
And especially you need that flexibility in times of Corona, where everything then goes virtually. And I believe that it also kind of like played into both of your hands, that you could cut on the travel costs that you had and meet virtually all the time, also with the business units.
That's true.
Then maybe another question to you, Francisco. What are the next steps with the pilot?
So we are in contact with Christopher, and this is of course also an organizational thing where we will sit together and think if this should be outrolled or not, or if we want to do some other use cases. We are here quite flexible, I would say, because we do not have one single solution. So with exactly same data that we have received, we can also play through other solutions. And I'm really excited if at some point after this event we sit again together and discuss what would be interesting next steps.
Great outlook. And then last question, probably also for both of you, maybe Christopher, you want to start. What is the biggest reason that pilots fail?
So the first thing is define what is a failure. So for me, a failure is not if after a pilot we are not immediately rolling it out to 15 countries. So I think it's always as well very important to define what does failure mean for us. It's successful if we get answers to the questions we had in advance. I think there are a lot of reasons that might interfere. So basically, technical issues we might come along. Then sometimes we have as well restrictions on our side, so that some priorities change. So there are a lot of different factors there, but I think that's quite normal business. So obviously, very often that sometimes things can interfere. However, when we commit to pilots, and this is what we find out after selection days, the quota of successful pilots is really, really high. So when we commit to pilots, then we actually very often manage to set those pilots up.
All right. Thank you so much, Christopher. Franciscus, anything you want to add, or from the startup perspective, that leads a pilot to total failure, or the definition maybe of failure?
From our perspective as an AI and data science company, there are several reasons why a pilot might fail. Reason number one can be if the data is bad. You can't predict anything good if it's random or false or sparse. This was definitely not the case with MediaMarktSaturn. They had really nice data. Another thing is, of course, technical problems could arise theoretically in a pilot. And but I think the most important reason why, in general, in our business, some companies have a higher churn ratio when it comes to innovation projects or pilots is, I think, because it's not very clearly defined what you want to do. So many other companies, not in this case, here it was very clear, but other companies we know have a vague thing like, okay, we give you the data and just tell us what you come out. And we see that whenever you clearly define what is the problem that you want to solve, and also how can you measure the benefit, this is the best case. And in all other cases, it's much more harder to quantify that. And if you do not have, at the end of the day, a really quantitative prediction of what did this brought, what is the return on investment, then it's beginning to become shaky.
All right, that was very insightful. Thank you both for joining us to the session today. And we're looking forward to answering more questions later on in the networking session.